And welcome. We have a special presentation tonight. Dr. Alan Keyes is with us, the science advisor for EQ Biosciences, Mike Quattro, is with us on the phone. And we're going to have a discussion about, well, I think one of the most important issues / products / concerns that faces our country and, frankly, every country today. So let me start by welcoming Dr. Keyes. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you.
Always a pleasure to have you. And Mike
Great
Quattro,
to be with you.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure, Dan.
Now, let me start with Mike. Mike, tell people a little bit about your background and your position with EQ Biosciences.
Okay, thank you. I'd be glad to share my background with people. I was trained and educated as a biologist and a scientist through the master's level, and had taught also science and biology at the college level and the high school level, and spent the last 30 years of my business career in the biotech and biopharmaceutical area, essentially bringing out medicines for multiple sclerosis, the first ever medicine for MS, brought a number of cancer medications into the marketplace to help people with leukemias, lymphomas, and a variety of solid tumor cancers, and also spent a good deal of my time putting diabetes medicines into the marketplace as well, and all new first-in-class treatments that really help change people's lives. And for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been working still in cancer, both on the charity fundraising side as well as the business side, and now working with EQ Biosciences to take this exciting product and put it into the marketplace and really try to help people change their lives and be protected.
Very good. Now, Dr. Keyes, my audience knows you well. Most Americans know you well, but just take a minute, if you will, and talk about your educational background and your career, if you would, please.
Well, as you know, Stan, I was educated mainly in the study of government, economics, and things that are related to politics and such. Took my degree at Harvard as an undergraduate, got my doctor's degree also from Harvard some years back. I've been heavily involved in foreign policy areas and dealing in the last 20, 25 years with a lot of the issues that are of great concern to Americans overall, whether in the economic sphere, in the sphere of what is happening to the underlying moral fabric of our country. I've run for office a few times, been involved in organizing people at the grassroots, and have, of course, in the course of that, been very much a part of the discussion of what we need to do to meet the challenge of taking care of our people in their health, and how we can do that effectively and in a cost-efficient way in our health sector. And all of these things then come together to give me an interest in the very, I think, important and positive topic that we'll be talking about tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Keyes. Now, Mike Quattro, I'm going to play, and I know that you're on the phone because of some technical difficulties, but I'm going to play a short video that is in fact available on the Prevennia website about DNA. So if you would, please, gentlemen, let's play that video, and then we'll talk about DNA for just a moment.
Our bodies produce estrogen naturally, and kept in balance, it plays a vital role in keeping our cells healthy. But this balance can be disrupted by various stressors. Estrogen can react with DNA to form adducts, which, unchecked, can damage DNA strands, making them prone to mutation, possibly developing into breast cancer in women and prostate cancer in men. Prevennia is a combination of 4 natural antioxidants which enhance the body's immune system and greatly reduce this triggering mechanism. Prevennia helps the body to block the first step towards cancer.
Now, DNA is the blueprint that makes up every human body. Everyone's DNA is different. Is that a fair statement, Mike Quattro?
Yes, it is.
And is it also fair to say that every human being, male and female, has estrogen in their body?
That's also fair to say, yes.
And it's true that women have more than men, but men also have estrogen produced in their body?
That's correct.
Okay, I'm just trying to build, a basis for understanding.
Sure.
It was a decision some 40 plus years ago, maybe close to 50 at this point, by some scientists who were gathered together to decide how to deal with this terrible menace of cancer, where the founding scientist, Dr. Emile Cavaliere, along with others, were discussing whether or not to research ways to treat, deal with those who had cancer, or to take the more adventurous and more difficult road to try and find if there was a single lowest common denominator that initiated the process that led to cancer. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is.
Now, could you tell us, Mike Quattro, what decision was made and how they proceeded on that decision all those years ago?
Well, I think their research stems back to a lot of governmental initiatives back in the 60s and 70s from a variety of administrations, and really focusing on what was called then the war on cancer. And it led to the creation of a National Cancer Institute. It led also to the creation of an actual medical specialty that was focused on cancer. And prior to that, most cancers had been dealt with by physicians who were either internal medicine doctors or surgeons at universities and hospitals. Excuse me. So with the creation of the research efforts and the impetus, and obviously the funding that goes with it, many physicians started looking at several ways to treat patients and, in fact, stop the cancers and put them into remission or cure them. A number of other physicians and researchers at the PhD level started looking at the front end of the cancer, more toward what are the first initiating steps in oncogenesis, or that is the creation of a cancer, and trying to figure out if there were one or two unifying front end steps that if you could block them or interfere with them or balance them out, then you would essentially reduce the risks and chances of bad things happening to people's DNA, and also bad things happening from the accumulation of all those genetic defects. After all, cancer has been subsequently found out to be a disease of genetic defects and the accumulation of DNA damage, and not always in the sense of a hereditary type of gene that's passed on to certain offspring. It's more from living in the world and accumulating environmental insults, either from foods or other factors that you run into during your life.
Now, Dr. Keys, you're not a scientist. You're not, don't have Mike's background, but you do know the logic of prevention versus dealing with the problem. Could you address your thoughts as you've studied this issue and the research on this product, please?
Well, one of the things that attracted my attention and my interest, Stan, had to do with the fact that you're dealing here with an outcome, a result in Prevennia that was actually a consequence of a different mentality in approaching how we deal with disease. A lot of our time is spent, a lot of our research money and efforts are spent these days on how you treat problems after they have occurred. What really caught my attention was that on account of, as I understand it, a situation in which they had been looking in Italy, for instance, at what was leading to a higher incidence of leukemia among women who were working in a shoe-making plant. They found that when they removed the heavy concentration of benzene from their environment, they actually found improvement in terms of a lower incidence of this dread disease. Well, they looked at what would be the mechanism whereby that operated, and that brought them to focus on the fact that there was a benzene-like component in the metabolite of, as they call it, the product of metabolism, as estrogen operates in the body, that actually had the effect of producing damage to DNA by drawing away certain strands or segments of DNA in a damaging way. And what was really striking was that instead of just trying to think that through in terms of, okay, what does this mean in terms of how we treat the ailment after it occurs, they followed the path of prevention. And I've got to tell you, Stan, you know from speaking to me and working with me over the years, that when I've dealt with the healthcare issue in my political and public life, I have always placed the emphasis on the fact that if we're going to bring down costs, if we're going to deal with the challenges, then we need a health sector rather than just a sickness care sector, where you think about how you understand the body in its normal conditions, see the kinds of things that are derogating from that healthy state, and then second the motion of the body's defenses and mechanisms for healing itself in such a way as to help healthy people stay healthy and avoid these very expensive medical problems. That's exactly the path that is represented by the researchers who eventually produced this remarkable product. And I think that it's remarkable not only in terms of the effects that it is producing, but in terms of the transformation in one's understanding of how you take care of your health. And I think that that's fundamentally important, that these kinds of breakthroughs in prevention then help people to understand what is the key to both maintaining their health and, by the way, keeping the cost down, because it turns out that you can take a combination of naturally occurring ingredients, you can share it with people relatively inexpensively, instead of having treatments that once the disease is in you, are going to basically be at the bankrupting level for individuals and then pose a major challenge to the society as a whole.
Well said. Now, let me turn to Mike. Mike.
Sure.
Dr. Keys alluded to natural. Please talk to us about what these studies, and there were decades of studies involving millions, tens of millions of dollars, that they went down a natural path versus a allopathic or prescription drug path. Could you address that, please?
Certainly. And so the two pathways that people most normally attribute to medicine is, one is intervention and the other is prevention. And we probably understand and can relate to the intervention method more because it's more of a, I have a problem, what's my solution? So if something's bad, you cut it out, or if something is growing too rapidly, you give it a poison to kill it, and so forth. The difficulty with that approach is that you're waiting for the problem to occur, and that problem occurs as a result of imbalances in your system and also as a result of disruption of the balance of the body. And if you just turn your mind to the prevention side, prevention has to incorporate a concept that everyone learns about in high school biology, which is called homeostasis. And it just means that the body has many, many mechanisms of balancing out the good and the bad, too much of this, too little of that, and so forth. And so when you look at something like preventing bad things from happening, you address your inquisitive nature toward things that you do every day that can help restore homeostasis, because once it's out of whack, it takes a lot to get it back into whack. But when you look at a natural approach makes sense because you're going to take foods in on a routine daily basis. You're going to drink water. You're going to drink other refreshing liquids and so forth, and you're going to walk through the world and encounter a number of things. So what you want to put into your body are ingredients and substances that are probably as close to you find them in nature as possible. And so the researchers here felt, okay, if we're going to get ahead of this curve, let's look for compounds that occur in foods or in nature and other places that have the ability to help restore homeostasis. And what Dr. Keyes was saying earlier about the learnings that came out of the shoe factories and also the learnings that came out of all the research into pesticide use in the agricultural industry, where they noticed lots of leukemias and lymphomas being caused by exposure to insecticides and pesticides. And those were also due to heavy prominence of either heavy metals or benzene rings. And when you look back at your body naturally and you start to categorize what's going on, you have a number of hormones and other substances that undergo metabolism routinely all the time in your body. And there's a lot of rapid cellular turnover in your body. So we're making cells all the time. So this metabolism really has to be balanced. And what Drs. Rogan and Cavallari focused on was really the metabolism of estrogen. And as you noted earlier, both men and women have estrogen, and of course women have a lot more than we do. But be that as it may, that estrogen metabolism has to be balanced. And it was noticed early on that estrogen carcinogenesis can occur in a number of ways. And it was at first very controversial because, again, how could a natural substance in your body already be a bad actor in damaging your DNA? Well, as it turns out, if your homeostasis or your balancing mechanism is not operating properly, then you have to take something to put it back into balance. And they focused on the pathways whereby estrogen could become a bad actor or its metabolites could become bad actors. And they looked for the most powerful products they could find, and they really isolated 4 very powerful antioxidants which are naturally occurring. And they decided to focus on those ingredients and then see how much of each one you could take in a proactive sense that would provide some protection against accumulation of damaged DNA.
Now, Dr. Keyes, again, I asked you, and you were very excited about really delving into this. And the idea of balance is one that is logical. I would assume in your mind and in most people's minds, and the ingredients being natural. Now, these ingredients are resveratrol, which has been well vetted and talked about for many of its positive benefits, acetyl L-cysteine, an amino acid, melatonin, an essential for the human body, and lipoic acid. Now, names are just that, they're names, but when you looked at the reports and the comments from people like Dr. David Longfellow, the former director of the National Cancer Institute, what was your impression?
Well, Stan, I was impressed. I think that one of the things that always leads me to delve further into reports of things that are being produced now that are alternative ways of dealing with your health challenges, and I've been interested in this for many years. If the science of it makes sense, then I think you are then not going to be surprised when positive results are produced. And I found that the science of this makes sense, and when you see the studies that have been done, the reputable scientists that have found in the results of those studies convincing evidence that we're dealing here with the possibility of producing something that, if given to folks in the right time frame, it's actually going to act as a prophylactic, something that will guard against the development of cancer and help to reduce what has been, in the course of the 20th and early 21st centuries, an expansion of the threat to human life and health, in spite of what has been the major progress that was made in the 20th, early 21st century in the area of medical knowledge and medical techniques. It's one of those ironies of the situation of humanity right now that has a lot to do with the fact that what we were talking about earlier in terms of the things that can now attack the body's balance and produce anomalies in its operations and in the conditions of its cells and cellular components. Those things have multiplied precisely on account of some of the things that have otherwise contributed to economic expansion and greater productivity, but that have, in the use of chemicals and other things, attacked the body in ways that we're coming better to understand. And as we come to better understand how we're being attacked, we then also need to develop the sense that we can work with the body to make sure that its defenses will operate, and will operate, Stan, in a way that's for, not against, the health of the body. One of the things that struck me when I was going through the account of how Prevennia works had to do with the fact that when these metabolites, products of the metabolism of estrogen, are damaging the DNA, one of the things that actually produces the problem is the body's response, the body's attempt to repair that. But if you can prevent that damage from being done in the first place, then those the anomalies that result from those repairs and then lead to the distortion of the genetic information, they won't occur. It's in some ways after the fact, a kind of simple concept. It occurred to me when I was reading about it. What kept going through my mind, because it often goes through my mind when I'm looking at the DNA helix, was a line dance, right? Where you have a line, two lines that are dancing in tandem, essentially, and you have folks coming onto the dance floor to lure people out of the line and leave gaps, which will then mean that the line's going to have difficulty staying in formation. And we all know that information is the key to the operation of DNA. And so you then have these products like resveratrol that come in and they operate in different ways. Either they pair off with what would otherwise be the damaging attackers of the line, drawing away the participants in the line, or they shoo them out of the room or otherwise discourage them from being in the vicinity, or they actually can operate the way policemen do to suppress them altogether. And by putting in balance in these ingredients, because they have in these different ways of dealing with the attacks, the ingredients that you speak of emphasize different approaches. They have actually managed to come up with an approach that utilizes all of these different mechanisms to help defend the integrity of that DNA line. And I think that that whole result is what then keeps the body's mechanism for repair from becoming an enemy of its overall health. And so you second the motion of the body's defense system, working with it to help it maintain its equilibrium and success. And I think that sense that instead of kind of dealing with nature as a big problem that you have to solve, you are dealing with the natural mechanisms of our body as sources of information which, once understood, can then help us to develop ways of partnering with the body's mechanisms in order to increase its defensive health. It's really quite brilliant. And I think that that brilliance is then reflected in its results.
Mike, we just have a few minutes left. I'd like you to address an issue that Alan Keyes just brought up, and that is if the body's immune system has to devote a great deal of its capacity to dealing with these cells that result from the damaged DNA, when you prevent some, most, or all of that, do you not take a big load off of the immune system, and is that not very beneficial?
Well, I probably have a different take on it. First of all, a lot of this metabolism is happening at the cellular level or inside the cells, and it is being churned or repaired, if you will, within the cells. And so it really is representative of the body's innate cellular detoxification mechanisms. So if you look at the immune system affects things more generally in the body and usually will react to antigens and produce antibodies and so forth. And that probably would play a larger role later on, if you had cells that were carcinogenic or working against the body. So that's much more downstream. The real effects of intervening at the front end is that when you get damage, and a lot of things happen in your life, and you get damage from either internal estrogen or estrogen you might be supplementing with and so forth, and the body tries to detoxify the damage that occurs. So it tries to either get rid of it in an oxidation sense, and that's why a lot of people take antioxidants, and or it tries to repair it at the DNA level, and there are 5 or 6 DNA repair mechanisms that can try to over-repair and keep repairing and so forth. And in fact, once you put the right antioxidants in your system, you can really reduce the amount of work that the body has to spend to try to repair it. So it's not really the immune system per se, it really is the cellular repair and the DNA repair systems at that level. But if you do reduce any of the chances of bad cells floating around in your body, then your immune system really doesn't have to go scavenge them.
All right, well,
does that make...
Yeah, it's very, very well said. We're just about out of time, and I just want to kind of wrap this up. My Quattro, if a person takes this product Prevennia on a daily basis, morning and night, what will be the net effect on most or all human beings?
Well, I think it's been shown by the work of Rogan and Cavallari, and it is, again, very elegant. Dr. Keyes called it brilliant. I think it's very brilliant, too. But I think it's also elegant in the way it was done, because a lot of science, science is a progressive action. And essentially what they went through were a series of experiments that said, if this is true, then we should see this. And in point of fact, they went down that path and kept seeing the right things occurring, to the point where they say, if we interfere with this enzyme, or if we reduce the toxicity and so forth, we'll be able to see an effect. We can measure that effect. And one of the other brilliant things they did was they constructed a test where you could measure the byproducts and the bad metabolites in the urine. And what they were able to show is, in point of fact, if you took this combination of 4 antioxidants, which was rationally designed, and all their science supported the individual ratios of those antioxidants to each other. If you took those antioxidants for a period of time, what you in fact saw was if your measure of bad estrogen complex, and they were called DNA adducts, if you took this for quite a while, what you saw was those levels go back to normal or to 0. And these are levels of metabolites and damaged products that essentially are circulating in a very high fashion and high level in either women with breast cancer or women who are at a high risk for breast cancer, as well as men who are at a high risk for prostate cancer. So what they showed was that you could reduce those adduct levels, or those bad DNA complexes, back to normal. And again, they hypothesized it would lead to good things happening in the future.
Well, I think that sums it up. It's well said. I am so excited about this product because I believe, this is going off a little bit, I believe it is an answer to prayer. I think it is an answer where there have been no answers. I think it is an ounce of prevention versus pound of cure approach, and I am highly excited and confident, as is Dr. Keyes, and as is Mike Quattro, because this has 40 years of hard, disciplined science, funded by $38+ million worth of grants to prove that it's not just a theory, but in fact a fact. There's more to know. We'll be talking about this more. You can go to Prevennia.com and all the science is there and learn for yourself. We thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Keyes, for being a part of the show. Thank you, Mike Quattro, and thank you, America, for paying attention. Good night, everyone.
Good night.